Attorney General Brnovich, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Arizona today.
My honor, my pleasure. I wish I could have brought some sunshine.
Me too. It's a little rainy today. So you are in town because you're headed to the Supreme Court tomorrow to defend a rule that the Biden administration is trying to get rid of. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I am once again at the U.S. Supreme Court arguing to protect structured liberty and freedom and, quite frankly, protect us against the overreach of the Biden administration. And in this instance, what we were talking about is their failed border policies. What the Biden administration has done is it was a strategic surrender. The public charge rule is something that's been on the books for 100 years and it's been interpreted different ways. But it basically, at the heart of it is that if you are here and you're a non-citizen, you have to be able to support yourself. The Trump administration promulgated rules. They went through the rulemaking process that basically says you can't be on government benefits for more than 1 year of your first 3 years here. The Biden administration unilaterally just basically withdrew the rule. They surrendered. And I think it's important that we follow the law and we don't want to create bad incentives or the wrong incentives for people to come here.
So from what I've been hearing at the border, actually went myself at the end of last year, it's in crisis. I mean, it is just truly a tragedy what's going on down there. Why on earth, just to get into the minds of the Biden administration, what could possibly be their justification for getting rid of this rule?
You know, I will never, I guess, I think there's enough people,
that you can't answer
I think there's
that.
enough people floating around in his mind or in his earpiece right now.
Right.
But I do think this is part of what the progressive left is doing. I mean, we're seeing this, they want to essentially, socialize our economy, nationalize our elections. And now I think they want to overwhelm the system in their minds, I think, with people that will be Democratic voters because they want a bunch of people to come in. They're going to be dependent on the Democratic Party in government. And, look, I'm a first generation American. My parents lived through World War II. They lived through communism. And when your family has not just studied history, but lived it, you understand how important liberty and freedom is. And the Biden administration goes around talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars to study the root causes of immigration. Look, people come here because it's the greatest country in the world. And it is the greatest country in the world because we have a constitution and we have the rule of law. And that means that you have to go through the procedures and you have to go through a process, right? You have to do it the right way. It's not anti-immigration, it's anti-illegal immigration. And what the Biden administration has done is they've essentially decriminalized the process. We have a lawsuit right now in federal court against them where they aren't deporting people, deportation orders. And so, that's something that's very important because when you decriminalize something, you get more of it. We think that they're incentivizing and monetizing. And that's the lawsuit that I'm going to be personally arguing with the Supreme Court about the public charge rule. And so the Biden administration is systematically, dismantling our southern border. At one point, I thought they wanted to abolish ICE, but I think it's clear they just don't want any borders at all. They don't want any walls, another one of our lawsuits. And so the system's overwhelmed. And what breaks my heart, as a prosecutor, as a gang prosecutor, as a federal prosecutor, is the record amount of fentanyl and methamphetamine coming into our country. And people are dying and our communities are less safe as a result of the Biden administration's policies.
Mm-hmm. So I want to elaborate on that in my next question. Obviously, you're from Arizona, a state that is pretty hard hit by some of these quote unquote open border policies. What is the reality of that, these policies in your community in the state of Arizona and other border states?
Well, we see the rise in homicide rates has gone up 60% in the second largest county in Arizona. We know now that fentanyl and opioid overdose deaths have replaced car accidents and other causes of deaths for young people. And so it's having a impact on our communities, not only in human lives, but also physically. It's impacting us in so many ways. And so the costs really are immeasurable. And this is a crisis. It's a man-made catastrophe. It's a man-made disaster by the Biden administration's failing miserably, like right now. The things they're supposed to be doing, they're not doing. And we will be living with the impacts of this for at least a generation now. Because one other quick anecdote, the price of fentanyl, for example, it's declined. It's gone from about $20 a pill in Arizona to about $5 a pill. And I know as a prosecutor, we're seeing the price fall in other places as well. So anytime you get more fentanyl into a community, that means you're going to get more overdose deaths. Someone's niece, nephew, son, and daughter is going to die. Families are going to be impacted by this. And then we also know as the cartel seize control of the border, that means eventually there's going to be more violence and more crime in our neighborhoods.
So final question for you. You're, again, from Arizona. You're talking about the state level here, and now you're going and taking this to federal court. Why the disconnect between the federal government and the states that are actually having to deal with this crisis?
Well, I've always joked that Washington, D.C. is where good ideas go to die. And I think what happens is you end up with this kind of permanent political class or administrative class here in Washington, and I think they lose touch. And I think all they care about is getting more power, and that's why you see the federal government keeps growing and growing and growing, even beyond its constitutional bounds. I would remind folks that, James Madison, and if you read the Federalist Papers, and, what Hamilton and Madison were writing about was they wanted government to be small because they understood as the federal government becomes bigger and bigger, it tends to become oppressive, it becomes less responsive. And we all learn about, in high school, we used to, now they're jamming critical race theory. But no, but we used to learn that there was like these checks and balances between the executive and legislative and judicial branches. But remember, the framers understood the states were supposed to be the guardians of their citizens' freedom, and they were supposed to be pushing back against federal government. So to me, I feel like I'm in that great tradition of, Adams and Jefferson and, the folks that came before me that have a healthy skepticism towards the federal government and recognize that we as states, these are the laboratories of democracy, and we need to push back against federal overreach. Because once you cede that authority to the federal government, you're not getting it back.
Right. Well, I know the people of Arizona are thankful for you standing up for their rights. Thank you so much for joining us today, Attorney General Brnovich.
Thank you.